Move to economy before security drags you out.
I paid for this seat.
You don't belong here. Get out of my seat. You think you can just sit in first class?
I own this airline.
Sit down, kid. First class isn't for people like you. Jonathan Reed didn't lower his voice. He made sure the whole cabin heard it. The sentence cut through the soft hum of pre-flight chatter like a blade. Conversations paused. Heads turned. A glass of champagne stopped halfway to someone's lips. At gate 47, time didn't freeze, but it slowed enough for everyone to feel it. Ethan Cole didn't move. He sat in seat 2A, back straight, one hand resting lightly on a thick aviation law textbook. His hoodie was worn but clean. His sneakers were simple. Nothing about him matched the polished image of first class. And Jonathan Reed noticed every detail. Across the aisle, a woman in her late 60s tightened her grip on her handbag. She looked from Jonathan to Ethan, then down at her lap, choosing silence over discomfort. Behind them, a man in a navy blazer leaned into his phone camera, angling it just enough to capture what was happening without being obvious. Jonathan stepped closer. "Did you hear me?" he said louder now. "You're in the wrong seat." Ethan looked up slowly. His eyes were steady. Not defiant, not afraid, just present. "I believe you're in 2B, he said quietly. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. That calm unsettled Jonathan more than any argument could have. "You think this is a joke?" Jonathan snapped. "Where's your boarding group? Where's your escort?" A ripple moved through the boarding line. A few passengers shifted, unsure whether to move forward or stay back and watch. The tension was no longer subtle. It had weight now. From the galley, Laura Martinez noticed the disturbance. 8 years in the air had taught her how quickly small moments could spiral. She walked toward row 2, smile already in place, voice prepared to smooth things over. "Is there a problem here?" she asked. Jonathan turned to her with relief. Authority had arrived. "Yes, there is," he said. "This kid is in first class, obviously some kind of mistake." Laura glanced at Ethan. He had already returned to his book, as if the accusation wasn't worth his energy. She tapped her tablet, scrolling through the passenger list. "Sir," she said carefully, "Mr. Cole is assigned to this seat. Everything checks out." Jonathan let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Checks out," he repeated. "Look at him. You're telling me this is normal?" Laura hesitated, just for a second. But Ethan noticed. So did the man with the phone. So did the woman clutching her bag. That hesitation said more than words ever could. Jonathan leaned in closer, his voice dropping, sharper now. "Let me seize his ID. And the card he used to pay for this, because there's no way this is legitimate." Ethan closed his book, slowly, deliberately. Around them, the cabin quieted even more. Even the flight attendants further back had stopped moving. Something was building. Everyone felt it. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. No rush, no shaking hands, just control. "You want to verify who I am?" he asked. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't defensive. It was something else. Something that, if Jonathan had been paying attention, might have warned him to stop. But Jonathan Reed had spent his entire life believing he could read people at a glance. That success looked a certain way. That power dressed a certain way. That belonging could be judged in seconds. And in that moment, he made the same mistake he had made 1,000 times before. He decided without doubt, without hesitation, that Ethan Cole did not belong. What he didn't know was this. The quiet young man in the worn hoodie wasn't trying to prove he belonged. He was watching, he was listening, and he owned every decision that would be made on that aircraft. Jonathan stared at the wallet in Ethan's hand, like it was evidence in a trial he had already decided. "Go ahead," he said. "Let's see it." Ethan handed it to Laura without a word. She took the ID, looked at it longer than necessary. Her eyes moved back and forth. Name, date of birth, Texas address, everything normal. Too normal. "Marcus, sorry, Ethan Cole," she corrected herself quietly. "It matches the manifest." Jonathan scoffed. "That doesn't mean anything. People fake IDs all the time. A man 2 rows back shifted in his seat. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, just loud enough to be heard. "That's a stretch." Jonathan turned his head sharply. "You got something to say?" The man looked down. "No, not my business." And just like that, the silence returned. Heavy, familiar, the kind that lets things go too far. Ethan noticed it. He always did. He watched how people chose comfort over courage. Not out of cruelty, out of habit, out of fear of becoming the next target. Laura cleared her throat. "Sir, his ticket is valid. There's no issue here." Jonathan didn't move. "What about the payment?" he pressed. "You're telling me he paid for this seat himself?" Ethan reached into his wallet again. This time, slower. He pulled out a simple student credit card, worn at the edges, nothing impressive. Jonathan's face lit up, not with relief, with satisfaction. "There it is," he said. "That's exactly what I thought." He turned slightly so the people behind him could see. $500 limit. "You expect me to believe this pays for first class?" A woman near the aisle shifted uncomfortably. She whispered to her husband, "This doesn't feel right." Her husband shook his head. "Just stay out of it." Laura looked back at her tablet. Her fingers paused, then moved again, scrolling, slower now. Something wasn't adding up. "Mr. Reed," she said carefully, "this seat wasn't purchased with that card." Jonathan leaned in. "Then who paid for it?" Laura hesitated again. "Just a beat. It's listed under a corporate account." Jonathan let out a short laugh. "Corporate account? For him?" He looked Ethan up and down again. Hoodie, backpack, sneakers. "Let me guess," he said. "Family business? Landscaping? Cleaning services?" A few passengers looked away. Others stared harder. Ethan closed his wallet, set it on the tray table. His fingers rested on it for a second longer than needed. "I don't think my employer is relevant," he said. His voice was still calm. But there was something under it now. A quiet weight. Jonathan heard it and chose to ignore it. "Oh, it's relevant," he shot back. "Because right now it looks like someone made a mistake. And I don't like mistakes when I'm paying this kind of money." From the aisle, a younger flight attendant hovered, unsure whether to step in. She looked at Laura, waiting for direction. Laura didn't give one. That silence said everything. Ethan noticed that too. He noticed the way Laura avoided eye contact now, the way she shifted her weight, the way she was trying to keep things calm without actually stopping what was happening. Policy said intervene. Reality said be careful. Jonathan took another step closer. Now he was standing over Ethan. "You know what I think?" he said. "I think you got lucky. Some upgrade, some error. And instead of doing the right thing, you decided to take advantage." Ethan looked up at him. Not angry, not defensive, just measuring. "You're assuming a lot," he said. "I don't need to assume," Jonathan snapped. "I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. I know how this works." The words hung there. Older man, younger man, power, status, assumptions. Across the aisle, the woman with the handbag finally spoke. Soft but clear. "He has a ticket," she said. "Maybe that should be enough." Jonathan turned toward her. "Mom, with respect, you don't understand how these systems work." She held his gaze for a second, then looked down again. That was all it took. Jonathan straightened his jacket, smoothed the front like he was resetting control. "Elena," he said, using the wrong name without noticing. "Call the captain. This needs to be handled properly." Laura didn't correct him. She hesitated. And in that hesitation, Ethan made a decision. Not to argue, not to explain. To wait, because every word being said, every choice being made, was telling him exactly what he needed to know. Laura's fingers hovered over her tablet, but she didn't move. Call the captain. It sounded simple, routine, even. But something about the way Jonathan said it made it heavier than protocol. "Sir," she said, trying to steady her voice, "there's no operational issue here. We don't need to involve the cockpit." Jonathan didn't blink. "Then you're refusing a reasonable request from a paying passenger?" That word hung in the air. Paying, as if it carried more weight than dignity, more than fairness, more than truth. Laura felt the eyes on her now. Passengers, crew, all waiting to see what she would do. Behind her, the younger flight attendant shifted again. One step forward, then stopped, waiting for permission that never came. Ethan watched it all. The hierarchy, the hesitation, the quiet calculation. This wasn't new to him. It never was. Fine, Jonathan said, his voice rising, just enough. If you won't call him, I will. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, held it up like a threat. That got a reaction. Sir, you can't contact the cockpit directly, Laura said quickly. That's against federal regulations. Jonathan smiled, not kindly. Then maybe you should do your job. A few passengers exchanged looks. A man in a gray sweater leaned toward the aisle. This is getting out of hand, he said quietly. From across the row, Angela leaned forward, her voice low but firm. He's right. This isn't okay. Jonathan turned his head slowly. You don't know what you're talking about. Angela didn't back down. I know harassment when I see it. That word landed harder than anything else so far. Harassment. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Ethan didn't move, but his eyes shifted. Just slightly. Taking in Angela, taking in the man with the camera, taking in every person who chose to speak, and every person who didn't. Laura felt it too, the shift. The moment when something private becomes public. When a scene becomes a situation. Sir, she tried again. Softer now. Why don't we just get you seated so we can continue boarding? Jonathan laughed. Short, sharp. I'm not sitting down next to him. Silence. Clear. Final, that was the line. Ethan leaned back in his seat, slowly, his hands folded in his lap, calm on the surface. But something inside had changed. Not anger. Clarity. Jonathan pointed at him, not touching, but close enough. You see this? He said to the people behind him. This is exactly what's wrong. Standards don't matter anymore. Anyone can just walk in and take what they didn't earn. The words echoed. Earn, deserve, belong, old ideas. Worn smooth by repetition. Ethan let them sit there. Then he spoke. You think you know how I got here. It wasn't a question. Jonathan didn't hesitate. I do. Ethan nodded once. And if you're wrong? Jonathan smirked. I'm not. A pause. Small, but it stretched, because deep down there was a flicker, doubt. Jonathan felt it and crushed it. He stepped closer again, leaning in just enough to invade space without crossing a line he couldn't explain away. Look, he said, lower now, controlled. I'm giving you a chance to fix this before it becomes a bigger problem. Ethan's eyes didn't move. It already is a bigger problem, he said quietly. That landed, not loud, not aggressive, but precise. From the back, someone whispered, he's right. Another voice, softer. This should have been stopped already. Laura heard that one. It hit harder than anything Jonathan had said. Because it was true, she should have stopped it. Earlier. Before it grew teeth. Before it drew a crowd. Before it became something she couldn't control. Her grip tightened on the tablet. Mr. Reed, she said. Firmer now. You need to take your seat. Jonathan turned slowly. No, just that. One word. Flat. Final, the cabin held its breath, because everyone felt it now. This wasn't about a seat anymore. It was about power. Who had it, who thought they had it, and who was about to prove they were wrong? Ethan glanced once toward the front of the plane, toward the closed cockpit door, then back to Jonathan, still calm, still quiet, but no longer just observing, waiting, for the exact moment when the truth would speak for itself. The boarding door was still open, but no one was moving anymore. People stood frozen in the aisle, clutching carry-ons, half-turned like they had forgotten where they were going. The usual rhythm of boarding had collapsed into something tense and watchful. Laura exhaled slowly. This had gone too far. Sir, she said again. Sharper now, you are delaying boarding. You need to take your seat. Jonathan didn't even look at her. I said I'm not sitting next to him. His voice was steady. But underneath it, there was something else now. Not just anger, ownership. The kind that came from a lifetime of getting his way. Behind him, a gate agent leaned in from the aircraft door. Everything okay in here? She asked, trying to keep her tone light. No one answered right away. That silence told her everything. Laura forced a smile. We're just resolving a seating question. The agent glanced at Ethan, then at Jonathan, then back at Laura. Looks like more than that, she said quietly. Jonathan turned just enough to catch her eye. It is more than that. The agent hesitated. She had seen this before. Not exactly like this, but close enough. A situation that didn't follow the script. "Sir," she said carefully, "if there's an issue, we can step off the aircraft and talk." "I'm not stepping off anything," Jonathan cut in. "I paid for this seat. I'm staying." Ethan watched that exchange without moving. Every word, every tone, every choice. It was all data to him. Angela shifted in her seat, her voice low but firm. "You're making this worse than it needs to be." Jonathan turned again. "No, I'm fixing it." Kevin, still holding his phone, leaned forward slightly. "By doing what? Embarrassing someone for sitting where they're supposed to sit?" Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "You don't know the whole story." Kevin didn't flinch. "Then tell us. A beat." Jonathan opened his mouth, then stopped, because there was nothing to tell that wouldn't sound exactly like what it was. Assumption, judgment, bias. He looked back at Ethan, still sitting, still calm. That calm was starting to feel like defiance. "You're enjoying this," Jonathan said quietly. Ethan tilted his head just slightly. "No." "Then why aren't you saying anything?" Ethan held his gaze. "Because you've already decided what you believe. That landed harder than anything else so far." Jonathan felt it, the truth in it, and rejected it instantly. "I believe what I see," he snapped. Ethan nodded once. "That's the problem." The words didn't raise in volume, but they cut. Across the aisle, the older woman finally looked up again. This time, she didn't look away. "Son," she said to Jonathan, her voice calm but steady. "Sometimes what you see isn't the whole picture." Jonathan let out a breath through his nose. "With respect, Mom, I've spent decades reading people. I trust my judgment." She studied him for a moment, then said quietly, "That confidence can blind you." That stung, more than he expected. He turned away from her, back to Laura. "Are you going to handle this or not?" Laura's jaw tightened. Policy, customer service, conflict resolution, none of it felt clear anymore. Because this wasn't just a difficult passenger. This was a test of her judgment, of her courage, of whether she would protect the right thing or the easier thing. She glanced at Ethan. He met her eyes for the first time. No anger, no accusation, just awareness. Like he understood exactly what she was weighing, and what it would cost. That made it harder. "Not easier, mister." "Reed," she said, her voice steadier now. "There is no seating error. Mr. Cole is authorized to be here. You need to take your assigned seat so we can depart." Jonathan stared at her, long enough for everyone to feel it. "You're choosing him," he said. Laura didn't respond right away, because she knew that's how he saw it. Not right versus wrong, but sides. Finally, she said, "I'm choosing to follow policy." Jonathan shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "you're choosing to ignore what's obvious." Ethan leaned back slightly. The moment was shifting. Not loudly, not dramatically, but something had cracked, and once it cracks, it doesn't go back the same. Jonathan looked around the cabin, at the faces, at the phones, at the silence that wasn't fully silent anymore. Then back at Ethan, and in that moment, something in him hardened. If he couldn't win this quietly, he would make it loud, very loud. And that decision was about to change everything. Jonathan straightened his jacket, like he was about to step into a boardroom. "If you won't handle it," he said, voice rising, "then I will." He turned toward the open cabin. Not just to Laura, not just to Ethan, to everyone. "You're all seeing this, right?" he said. "This is what it's come to. Standards don't matter anymore." The words echoed down the aisle. A few passengers shifted, some uncomfortable, some curious, a few nodding. That was enough for him. He stepped into the aisle, making himself bigger. Louder. "I paid for first class," he continued. "Not to sit next to someone who clearly doesn't belong here." There it was. No filter now, no pretense. Angela leaned forward immediately. "You need to stop," she said. Her voice was controlled, but there was steel in it now. "You don't get to decide who belongs." Jonathan turned sharply. "And you don't get to tell me how to think." Kevin lifted his phone higher, no longer hiding it. "Keep talking," he said quietly. "You're doing great." That hit. Jonathan noticed the camera, the angle, the fact that he was no longer just speaking to a cabin. He was being recorded. For a second, just a second, he hesitated. Then his pride stepped in. Good, he said. Record it. People should see what's happening. Ethan watched that shift happen in real time. The moment where someone chooses ego over control. It always looked the same. He rested his hands on the armrest, calm, still. Jonathan pointed at him again. You want to sit here? Fine. Then explain it. Ethan didn't move. Explain what? He asked. How you got this seat? Jonathan snapped. Because nobody's buying this. A man further back spoke up. Mid-50s, calm voice. Maybe it's none of your business, he said. Jonathan didn't even look at him. It became my business the second I had to deal with it. Laura stepped in again, this time closer. Sir, this conversation is over, she said. You need to sit down. Jonathan ignored her completely. He leaned closer to Ethan. Let's make it simple, he said. Lower voice now, tighter. Who paid for your ticket? Ethan held his gaze. My company. Jonathan let out a breath through his nose. Right, your company. He shook his head, almost laughing. And what company is that? The question hung, not loud, but heavy. Around them, the air felt tighter, like something was about to break. Ethan glanced down at his book, closed it again. Slower this time. Then he looked back up. I work in aviation, he said. Jonathan smiled. Thin, sharp. That's not an answer, it's enough of one. Jonathan stepped back half a step. Not retreating, resetting. No, he said. It's not. He looked around again, making sure he still had an audience. Because here's the thing, he continued. People work hard to get here. Years. Decades. You don't just show up in a hoodie and sit in first class. The older woman across the aisle shook her head slowly. You don't know his story, she said. Jonathan turned to her again, frustration breaking through. I don't need to know his story, he snapped. I can see it. Ethan's eyes didn't leave him. That's exactly the problem, he said quietly. Jonathan's jaw tightened. You keep saying that, he replied, like it means something. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Now, for the first time, there was a shift in his tone. Still calm, but firmer. It means you've already decided who I am, he said, without asking a single real question. Silence. Not empty. Charge, Jonathan felt it again. That flicker. He crushed it harder this time. I asked, he said. You just won't answer. Ethan held his gaze. No, he said. You're not asking, you're accusing. That landed. Kevin let out a quiet breath. He's got a point. Angela nodded. Yeah, he does. Laura closed her eyes for a second. This was spiraling, fast, and she was losing control of it. Sir, she said again. Louder now. You need to sit down or we will have to involve security. That word changed everything. Security. Now it wasn't just a disagreement. It was about to become official. Jonathan turned slowly. You'd call security, he said. On me? Laura didn't answer. Because she didn't know, and Ethan saw that. Clear as day. He leaned back again. The moment was almost there. Not yet, but close, very close. And when it came, it wouldn't need to be loud. It would just need to be true. The word security hung in the air longer than anyone expected. Jonathan let out a slow breath, then laughed. Not loud, not amused. Just sharp enough to cut through the tension. You're going to call security on me? He said again. Quieter now. Because I asked a question. Laura didn't respond. She couldn't. Because it wasn't just a question anymore. And everyone knew it. Behind them, the gate agent stepped halfway into the cabin again. Her eyes moved quickly from face to face, reading the room. We need to keep boarding, she said. We're already behind schedule. No one moved. Not a single person. That was the problem. Jonathan turned his attention back to Ethan. This is your last chance, he said. His voice dropped. Controlled. Dangerous in a different way now. You can fix this, right now. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Fix what? This, Jonathan said, gesturing around them. You get up, you move to your actual seat. And we all move on. Ethan held his gaze. There is no other seat, he said. Jonathan's jaw flexed. There always is. Ethan shook his head once. Not for me. That answer didn't calm anything. It made it worse. Because it sounded like certainty. And Jonathan was used to being the most certain person in any room. He stepped even closer. Close enough now that the space between them felt personal. You're making a mistake, he said. Ethan didn't blink. No, he replied quietly. You are. That did it. Jonathan's control slipped. Just a fraction, but enough. You think you're smarter than everyone here? He snapped. You think because you can sit there quietly you win? Ethan didn't answer right away. He let the words sit. Let the room hear them. Then he spoke. I'm not trying to win, he said. I'm trying to understand why this is happening. The tone shifted again. Not defensive, not aggressive. Curious. That confused Jonathan more than anything. Why, he repeated. Ethan nodded. Why you're so sure I don't belong, he said. Why that matters so much to you. Silence, real silence this time. Not tension, reflection. A few people looked down. Others looked away. Because the question didn't just land on Jonathan. It landed on all of them. Jonathan felt it too. That moment where the spotlight turns inward, he rejected it immediately. Don't turn this around, he said. This isn't about me. Ethan's eyes stayed on him. It is, he said. Short, clean, no room to hide from it. From the back, Kevin let out a quiet breath. Man, Angela shook her head slowly. He's asking the right question. Laura felt her chest tighten, because she knew something had just shifted again. The conversation wasn't about a seat anymore. It was about something deeper, something harder to control. Jonathan felt the ground moving under him, not literally, but socially, emotionally. The room wasn't fully on his side anymore, and that made him desperate. You want answers? He said suddenly louder again. Fine. He straightened, pulling himself back together. You don't belong here, he said, pointing again, because this is first class. People work their whole lives to get here. They earn it. They build something. They prove something. He paused, then added, colder, and you haven't. The words hit the cabin like a drop in temperature. Angela inhaled sharply. Kevin's phone didn't move. The older woman closed her eyes for a second. Ethan absorbed it, didn't flinch, didn't react. But something inside him settled, because now it was clear. Completely clear. This wasn't about confusion, or policy, or even the seat. It was about belief. About who deserves space, who deserves respect, who gets questioned, and who doesn't. Ethan leaned forward slightly. For the first time, he wasn't just responding. He was about to speak. Not to defend himself, but to reveal something Jonathan had never considered. And the moment that had been building was finally here. Ethan leaned forward just enough for Jonathan to see his eyes clearly. You said people earn their place here, he said. His voice was still calm, but there was no softness left in it. You're right. Jonathan blinked once. Didn't expect agreement? Ethan continued. But you're assuming you know what earning looks like. A pause, short, heavy. Jonathan let out a quiet scoff. I know exactly what it looks like. Ethan nodded slowly. Then tell me. The question landed differently this time. Not defensive, not reactive, direct. Jonathan hesitated just a second. Success, he said. Work. Discipline. Building something real. Ethan held his gaze. I built something, he said. Jonathan shook his head immediately. No. You're saying that. That's not the same thing. Ethan didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached into his backpack. Slow. Deliberate. No sudden movement. Just enough to draw attention. The sound of the zipper cut through the silence. Kevin's camera followed the motion. Angela leaned forward slightly. Laura held her breath without realizing it. Ethan pulled out a thin folder, set it on the tray table, opened it. Inside were printed documents. Clean, organized, not flashy, just real. He turned the folder slightly so Laura could see first. Can you read that? He asked. Laura stepped closer, eyes scanning the top page. Her brow furrowed, then tightened. Her lips parted slightly. She read the header again, and again. Jonathan watched her face change. What is it? He said. What are you looking at? Laura didn't answer, because now she wasn't just reading. She was realizing. Ethan spoke quietly. It's a corporate authorization letter, he said. For this flight. Jonathan frowned. So? Ethan looked at him. This seat, he said, tapping the page lightly, was assigned through a direct executive allocation. Jonathan's expression didn't change. Not yet, because he didn't understand. Executive, he repeated. You mean someone pulled strings for you? Ethan shook his head once. No, he said. I mean, I approved it. Silence. A different kind this time. Not confusion, not tension. Something closer to disbelief. Jonathan stared at him, then laughed. Loud. Too loud. That's your move? He said. You expect anyone to believe that? Ethan didn't react to the laughter. He simply slid the document across the tray table, closer, into the light. Laura's voice came out before she could stop it. Sir. It was barely above a whisper, but everyone heard it. Jonathan turned to her sharply. What? Laura looked up. Her face had lost color. This document, she said slowly, it's signed by corporate leadership. Jonathan shrugged. So what? That doesn't mean anything. Laura swallowed. It does, she said. She hesitated, then said it. It means the assignment came from the top. The words settled into the cabin like weight. Jonathan's smile faded. Just a little. Then who signed it? He asked. Ethan answered before Laura could. I did. No volume, no emphasis, just truth. Jonathan stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for the correction, for anything that would make sense of that sentence. Nothing came. Ethan held his gaze, unblinking, unrushed. From the back, someone whispered. No way, Kevin didn't move. Camera steady, capturing everything. Angela's eyes shifted between them, trying to read what was happening. Jonathan let out a breath. Slow. Okay, he said. Enough. His voice was tighter now. Controlled again, but barely. You're crossing a line. Ethan didn't move. No, he said quietly. You already crossed it. That landed harder than anything before. Because now something was different. Jonathan could feel it. The room had changed. The way people were looking at him. At Ethan. At Laura. Something was shifting. And, for the first time, Jonathan Reed wasn't sure he understood what was happening anymore. But Ethan did, completely. Because the truth had been placed on the table, and it wasn't going anywhere. Jonathan stared at the document like it had betrayed him. Then he shook his head. No, he said. No, that's not how this works. His voice was quieter now, but tighter, like something inside him was starting to crack. You don't just sign something like that, he continued. There are levels. There are approvals. There are, Ethan said. He didn't raise his voice, didn't interrupt harshly, just corrected. Jonathan stopped mid-sentence. Ethan reached into his pocket again, this time slower than before. He pulled out his phone. No sudden movement, no theatrics. He unlocked it, tapped once, then turned the screen toward Laura. Can you confirm this? He asked. Laura leaned in. Her eyes moved quickly at first, then slowed, then stopped. Her hand lifted slightly, not touching the phone, just hovering near it, like she didn't fully trust what she was seeing. It's the internal system, she said under her breath. Executive access. Jonathan stepped closer. What is it? Laura didn't answer right away, because now she wasn't guessing. She knew. This is the live authorization log, she said. It shows seat assignments, overrides, internal approvals. She looked up at Ethan, then back at the screen, then back at him again. Her voice dropped. It's signed under. She paused, swallowing. Your name. Silence. Not tense, not confused, heavy. Jonathan felt it settle in his chest. That doesn't prove anything, he said quickly. Too quickly. People fake things all the time. Screenshots. Systems, it's not a screenshot, Laura said. She didn't mean to cut him off. But she did. It's live, she added. You can't fake that without internal clearance. Jonathan looked at the phone again. For the first time, he wasn't dismissing it. He was trying to understand it. That was the shift. Small, but real. Ethan watched it happen. The moment where certainty turns into doubt, and doubt turns into fear. You said people earn their place, Ethan said quietly. Jonathan didn't respond. You said they build something, prove something. Ethan let a breath out. I did. The words weren't loud, but they carried. Across the aisle, the older woman leaned back slowly, her eyes soft now. Not anxious, not uncertain, understanding. Angela crossed her arms, not defensive, just settled. Like the answer she needed had arrived. Kevin lowered his phone just a fraction. Not because the moment was over, but because it had changed. Jonathan shook his head again. Slower this time. No, he said. You're just saying that. but it didn't sound like before. Before, it was conviction. Now it was hope. Hope that he wasn't wrong. Ethan met his eyes. "I don't need you to believe me," he said. That landed deeper than anything else, because it removed the argument completely. Jonathan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked around the cabin, at the faces, at the silence, at Laura. "Say something," he said to her. "You're just going to stand there?" Laura felt it hit her. All of it. The pressure, the responsibility. The moment she could have stopped this and didn't. She looked at Ethan again, then at Jonathan, then at the document, and finally she spoke. "Sir," she said slowly, "I think you need to take your seat. Not a suggestion, not soft, clear." Jonathan stared at her, because now it sounded different. Not like a crew member trying to manage a situation. Like someone who had just realized what the situation actually was. "You're serious," he said. Laura nodded once. "I am." Jonathan's throat tightened. He looked back at Ethan, really looked this time. Not at the hoodie, not at the shoes, at him. And for the first time, he saw something he hadn't seen before. Not status, not wealth, authority, quiet, unshaken, real, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. And that realization hit harder than anything Ethan had said. Jonathan took a step back. Just one. But it was enough, because the man who had been so certain was no longer sure of anything. Jonathan's hand tightened at his side, then slowly dropped. He looked at Ethan again, but this time the anger wasn't leading anymore. Confusion was, then something heavier. Regret trying to find a way in. "This doesn't make sense," he said. Not loud, not aggressive, just searching. Ethan didn't respond, because he knew something Jonathan didn't yet. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. The truth was already there. Jonathan just hadn't accepted it. Behind them, the gate agent stepped fully into the cabin now. "We need to close the door," she said. "We're holding everyone." Laura nodded quickly, relief and tension mixing in her chest. "Sir," she said to Jonathan, "more grounded now. You need to take your assigned seat so we can depart." Jonathan didn't move right away. He looked around again. At Kevin, still holding the phone. At Angela, watching him without flinching. At the older woman who now met his eyes without fear. And then back at Ethan. Still sitting, still calm. That calm now felt different. Not passive. Certain, Jonathan swallowed. "You should have said something," he muttered. Ethan tilted his head slightly. "I did." Jonathan shook his head. "No, not like that." There was a pause. Ethan leaned forward just a little. "You weren't listening," he said. That hit harder than anything else. Because it was true. Jonathan exhaled slowly. The fight was gone. Not replaced with understanding. Not yet. But the certainty was gone. And without it, he didn't know where to stand. "Look," he said, voice lower. Now this got out of hand. No one responded. Because that wasn't enough. Not after everything that had been said. Not after the way it had been said. Angela spoke first. "It didn't get out of hand," she said. "You took it there." Jonathan closed his eyes. For a second. Just a second. When he opened them, he didn't argue. That was new. "I shouldn't have," he started, then stopped. The words didn't come easily, because this wasn't a room he controlled. This wasn't a meeting he could reset. This was real, public, permanent. Kevin's phone was still there, recording, and Jonathan knew it. Every word now mattered. "Look." He tried again. I made an assumption. Ethan watched him. Didn't interrupt, didn't help. Jonathan nodded once, like he was forcing himself forward. And I was wrong. Silence, heavy, but different. Not tense, not explosive. Just honest. The older woman gave a small nod. Angela didn't move. Kevin lowered his phone slightly, not stopping. Just adjusting. Ethan leaned back in his seat, studying. Not for weakness. For truth. It took a moment. Then he spoke. "Why?" he asked. Jonathan frowned slightly. "Why what?" "Why did you assume?" Ethan said. Not aggressive, not accusing. Just direct. Jonathan hesitated. That question was harder than anything before. Because it didn't ask about the moment, it asked about him. He looked down for a second, then back up. "I don't know," he said. But even as he said it, he knew that wasn't fully true. He just didn't want to say the real answer out loud. Ethan didn't push. He didn't need to. The silence around that question did more than any argument, because everyone in that cabin understood it, even if they didn't say it. Laura took a step back. The tension had shifted. Not gone, but changed. "Let's get seated," she said quietly. "We need to close the door." Jonathan nodded. Slowly, he turned, walked back toward seat 2B. Each step measured, each step heavier than the last. When he sat down, he didn't look at Ethan. Not yet. He buckled his seatbelt, hands slightly tighter than before. The cabin started to move again. Passengers stepped forward. Bags shifted. Voices returned. But softer now. Different. Something had happened here. Something that wouldn't just disappear once the plane took off. Ethan picked up his book again, opened it. But he didn't read. Not yet. Because the moment wasn't over. Not completely. Jonathan finally turned his head. Just slightly. "Look," he said, barely above a whisper. He stopped. The words still weren't easy. Ethan looked at him, calm, waiting. Jonathan exhaled. "I'm sorry." And this time it wasn't for the room. It was for himself. The cabin door closed with a firm, final click. That sound settled everything. Engines hummed to life beneath the floor. A low vibration moved through the seats. Outside, ground crew stepped back. Inside, people adjusted themselves, like they were waking up from something they didn't expect to witness. But no one was really the same. Jonathan sat still in seat 2B. His hands rested on his knees. Fingers slightly curled. Not clenched anymore. Just held. He stared forward at nothing. Then slowly, almost carefully, he turned his head again. Ethan was looking down at his book, calm, composed, like the storm had never touched him. Jonathan studied him. Really studied him this time. Not the hoodie, not the age. The presence, the way he didn't rush to forgive, didn't rush to judge. Just existed in truth. "I meant it," Jonathan said quietly. Ethan didn't look up right away. The pause mattered. Because apologies are easy, accountability is not. After a second, Ethan closed his book, turned his head, met his eyes. "I know," he said, simple. Not warm, not cold, honest. Jonathan nodded, once. A small movement, but it carried weight. "I've spent my whole life thinking I understood people," he admitted. His voice was lower now, stripped of performance, thinking I could see everything just by looking. Ethan listened, didn't interrupt. Jonathan let out a slow breath. "I was wrong," he said. That word stayed in the air. Wrong. Not mistaken. Not confused. Wrong. Across the aisle, the older woman leaned back in her seat. Her eyes softened. Not because everything was fixed, but because something real had happened. Angela uncrossed her arms. Not forgiving, not forgetting, but no longer bracing for impact. Kevin finally lowered his phone. Not because the moment wasn't important anymore, but because it had changed. It wasn't about catching someone. It was about understanding something. Laura stood near the galley, watching. Quiet, she replayed it in her head. The hesitation, the silence. The moment she chose to wait instead of act. Her shoulders dropped slightly. That would stay with her. Long after this flight. Ethan looked forward again, then back at Jonathan. "People don't earn respect the way you think," he said. Jonathan listened. "They don't earn it through status, or money, or where they sit," Ethan continued. He paused. "Respect starts with how you treat someone you don't understand." Jonathan didn't respond right away. Because that truth didn't argue. It settled. The plane began to move. Slow at first, then steady. The runway stretched ahead, a straight line forward. No turning back. Jonathan leaned his head back against the seat, closed his eyes for a second, not to escape, to sit with it. Everything he said. Everything he assumed, everything he learned. When he opened them again, the world looked the same. But he didn't. The engines roared louder. The plane lifted, city shrinking beneath them, clouds ahead. A different kind of silence filled the cabin now. Not tension, reflection. Ethan picked up his book again. This time he read. Because for him, the moment had passed. The lesson had already been delivered. Not through force, not through anger, through truth. And truth doesn't need to raise its voice. It just needs to stand. If this story stayed with you, take a second to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts below with 3 simple words like never stay silent.